My fiance's ex-wife has been poisoning him against me for 2 years, so I revealed what she's really been doing behind closed doors. I'm Emma. I'm 26, and I've been teaching elementary school for 4 years now. I thought I had my life pretty much figured out until I met David 2.5 years ago. He's 34, works in tech, and seemed like this amazing guy who had his shit together, you know. He'd been divorced for 3 years when we met, has 2 kids. Lily, who's 10, and Jake, who's 8. And I'll be honest, dating someone with kids was new territory for me, but I was head over heels. David was so different from the guys I'd dated before. He was mature, responsible, had this whole established life. His kids were adorable, and his ex-wife Rebecca seemed, well, she seemed nice enough. She's 32, always perfectly put together, does a lot of charity work. On the surface, they had this whole amicable divorce co-parenting champions thing going on. I actually admired it at first, if I'm being honest. The kids were sweet to me initially. Lily would show me her drawings, Jake would tell me about his soccer games. I really tried to be good to them. You know, I didn't want to be some stereotypical evil stepmother figure. I bought them little gifts, helped with homework, went to their school events. I genuinely cared about them and wanted them to feel comfortable with me being in their dad's life. Rebecca and David had started this charity together when they were married. Something called the Foundation for Underprivileged Kids Education. She still runs it, and honestly I thought that was admirable. A devoted mother doing charity work, I felt bad even having negative thoughts about her sometimes. But here's the thing, and maybe I'm being paranoid, but I don't think so. I started noticing patterns. David would come back from dropping the kids off at Rebecca's house, or from their little co-parenting coffee meetings, and suddenly he'd be different, critical. He'd question things about me that he'd never questioned before. Like we'd be fine, and then after seeing Rebecca, he'd suddenly be worried about my spending habits, or whether I was mature enough to be around his children. I mean, I'm a teacher. I work with kids every single day. But after every interaction with Rebecca, David would have these new concerns about whether I really understood what it meant to be involved with someone who has children. It was like she was planting seeds of doubt in his head, and I was watching our relationship slowly deteriorate because of it. The kids started changing too. They went from being welcoming to distant, then eventually hostile. They'd say things like, "Mommy says you don't really love us," or "Daddy was happier before you came along." 8 and 10-year-olds don't come up with that stuff on their own, right? I'm not crazy for thinking that, am I? 6 months ago, David proposed and I was over the moon. But even then, something felt off. The closer we got to actually planning the wedding, the more he seemed to pull away. Every conversation with Rebecca seemed to plant new doubts in his mind about our future together. I started feeling like I was losing my mind, honestly. Was I imagining all of this? So I started paying closer attention, and honestly, the pattern was so obvious once I saw it, that I felt stupid for not noticing sooner. Every single time David had any contact with Rebecca, whether it was picking up the kids, dropping them off, or those co-parenting check-ins they'd have, he'd come home like a completely different person. I'm talking dramatic personality shifts here. We'd be having a perfectly normal weekend, laughing, making plans, and then Monday evening after he'd seen Rebecca, suddenly, I'm irresponsible with money because I bought coffee that morning instead of making it at home. Or I'm too immature to understand the complexities of blended families because I suggested we take the kids to an amusement park. The thing is, these weren't even David's concerns originally. I could tell because he'd use phrases that just didn't sound like him. Like David never cared about my coffee habit before, but suddenly he's worried about my financial priorities. And it was always framed as this caring, concerned conversation, where Rebecca had apparently just casually mentioned how important it is for a stepmother figure to be financially responsible around children. Don't even get me started on what was happening with Lily and Jake, those sweet kids who used to hug me when I came over. They started acting like I was some kind of threat. Jake, who's only 8, started asking me why I didn't have my own kids if I really loved children so much. Lily would roll her eyes when I tried to help with her homework and tell me that Mommy already showed me the right way to do it. I mean, I'm literally an elementary school teacher. I know how to help a kid with homework. But suddenly everything I did was wrong, and everything Rebecca said was gospel truth. The worst part was how Rebecca did it all so nicely. She never said anything directly awful about me. It was always this concerned motherly worry thing. Like she'd tell David she was just worried that I seemed overwhelmed by the responsibilities of being with someone who has children. Or she'd mention how she hoped David wasn't rushing into things, because the children needed stability. It was death by 1,000 cuts, you know. Each little comment designed to make David question whether I was really right for him and his family. The breaking point came last month. I'd just changed schools, found a better position with more pay and better benefits, and I was excited about it. David was happy for me initially, but then he had his weekly coffee meeting with Rebecca, and suddenly my job change was concerning. Suddenly it showed I was unable to commit to things long term, and maybe we should postpone the wedding until things settled down. I was devastated. We'd been planning this wedding for months, and because Rebecca decided my new job was somehow a red flag, David wanted to put everything on hold. That's when I knew for sure that something was seriously wrong with this picture. I started wondering what else might be going on. Rebecca always seemed to have money for nice clothes, expensive vacations with the kids, a new car every few years. I knew she ran that charity, but charity work doesn't usually pay that well, right? And David had mentioned that her divorce settlement wasn't huge because they'd agreed to split things pretty evenly. So where was all this money coming from? When David asked me to help him organize some paperwork for the charity's annual filing, I saw my chance to figure out what was really going on. And honestly, what I found made my stomach drop. What I found in those charity files absolutely floored me. I'm talking missing receipts, inconsistencies in the numbers donations that seemed to disappear into thin air. I'm not an accountant, but I'm not stupid either, and something was definitely not adding up. I know I probably should have talked to David right away, but honestly I was terrified. This woman had already convinced him that I was immature, financially irresponsible, and not suitable to be around his children. If I came to him with accusations about his ex-wife stealing from a children's charity, without solid proof, he'd probably think I'd completely lost my mind. So I did something that I'm still not sure was right or wrong. I started secretly photocopying documents when David wasn't looking. I made notes about Rebecca's spending versus what the charity books showed. I even started taking pictures of her social media posts, showing off expensive jewelry and designer bags. I felt like a crazy person doing it, but what choice did I have? Meanwhile, Rebecca seemed to sense that I was getting suspicious because her interference ramped up to a whole new level. Suddenly, David was getting daily texts about how the children were struggling with our relationship. She started suggesting that maybe David needed to focus on his children's emotional needs instead of planning a wedding, and it was working. David became completely cold toward me. He started questioning whether I really loved him, or if I was just interested in his financial security, which was especially ironic considering what I was discovering about Rebecca's actual financial situation. He'd ask me these pointed questions about my motivations, my career goals, whether I understood the sacrifices involved in being a stepmother. The kids became absolutely hostile. They'd refuse to talk to me when I came over, throw tantrums when David suggested family activities that included me, and constantly bring up how much they missed when it was just the three of them. Lily actually told me to my face that I was trying to replace their real mom, and that I'd never be good enough. I'm not going to lie. That hurt. A lot. These were children I'd grown to love, and watching them turn against me because of their mother's manipulation was heartbreaking. My job started suffering too. I couldn't focus in class because I was constantly stressed about what was happening at home. Other teachers started asking if I was okay because I looked exhausted all the time. I was losing weight from not eating, barely sleeping, and second-guessing every decision I made. Then came the final blow. Rebecca apparently told David that I'd been asking inappropriate questions about their family finances. She painted it like I was some kind of gold digger trying to figure out how much money David had. She said she was concerned about my true motives, and thought maybe David should take some time to really evaluate our relationship. That night, David asked me if we could take a break. He suggested I move out temporarily so he could focus on his children and figure things out. I knew exactly whose idea that had been, and I also knew that if I left, I'd never get the chance to expose what Rebecca was really doing. I had to make a choice: walk away and let her win, or fight back with what I'd discovered. Update 1. I'm not going to lie. What I did next was probably the scariest thing I've ever done in my life, but I was facing the complete destruction of my relationship and my reputation, and I couldn't just sit there and let Rebecca get away with it anymore. I called the charity board. I know. Going behind David's back like that probably seems awful, but what choice did I have? He wasn't going to listen to me at that point. Rebecca had him so convinced that I was this terrible, manipulative person that anything I said would just sound like jealous accusations. So I put together everything I'd found. All those photocopied documents, the financial inconsistencies, the pictures of Rebecca's expensive lifestyle that didn't match her supposed income. I organized it all into this presentation and requested an emergency meeting with the board. Let me tell you, walking into that boardroom was terrifying. These were people who had known Rebecca for years, who saw her as this devoted mother and charitable saint. And here I was, the young girlfriend, coming in with accusations that their beloved charity director was stealing from underprivileged children. But the evidence spoke for itself. We're talking about over $50,000 in missing funds over the past 18 months. Donations that were recorded as received but never made it to the actual programs. Fake vendor invoices. Money being transferred to personal accounts. It was all there in black and white. The board was shocked. I mean, these were good people who genuinely cared about helping kids and finding out that someone they trusted had been stealing from the very children they were trying to help. They were devastated and furious. They suspended Rebecca immediately pending a full investigation. Within hours, she was calling David absolutely hysterical, claiming that I was a vindictive woman trying to destroy her family because I was jealous of their co-parenting relationship. And David was furious with me. Not with Rebecca for stealing money from children, but with me for exposing it. He felt betrayed that I'd gone behind his back. Felt like both of the women in his life had been lying to him. And honestly, I understood his anger, even though it hurt like hell. He told me he needed time to process everything that had happened. I didn't know if our relationship would survive this, but at least the truth was finally out there. Update 2. The next few weeks were honestly a blur of chaos and vindication all rolled into one. The board hired a forensic accountant to dig deeper into the charity's finances, and what they found was so much worse than even I had suspected. It wasn't just the $50,000 I'd initially discovered. This woman had been running a sophisticated fraud operation for years. Fake vendor invoices, phantom employees, even falsified grant applications. We're talking about well over $100,000 stolen from programs meant to help underprivileged kids get school supplies and tutoring. I felt sick thinking about all the children who could have been helped with that money. But here's the thing that really got to me. When Rebecca was finally cornered with all the evidence, you know what her defense was. She claimed she deserved that money because she was a single mother raising David's children, and the divorce settlement wasn't enough. Like, are you kidding me? You steal from children and then play the victim card? The investigation also revealed something that honestly made my blood boil. During the interviews with board members, it came out that Rebecca had been systematically bad-mouthing me to them for months. She'd been telling them I was unstable, that I was pressuring David to cut ties with his children, and that I was financially motivated in the relationship. Suddenly, David started seeing the pattern too. All those concerns Rebecca had been sharing with him about me. She'd been planting the same seeds with everyone in their social circle. It was like watching him wake up from this fog he'd been living in for 2 years. The kids were absolutely devastated when they found out what their mother had done. Lily kept crying and asking why mommy would steal from kids who needed help for school. Jake was just confused and angry. It broke my heart watching them process the fact that their mother, who they'd been taught to see as this perfect charitable saint, was actually a criminal. David finally started to understand how Rebecca had been manipulating him, using his own insecurities about being a divorced dad against him. She'd made him doubt every decision he made about me by framing her manipulation as concern for the children. The police arrested Rebecca on embezzlement and fraud charges. She was looking at 2 to 3 years in prison. Update 3. If I thought things were complicated before, the custody situation turned everything into an absolute nightmare. The court immediately granted David temporary full custody since Rebecca was facing serious criminal charges. But honestly, that was just the beginning of our problems. The kids were completely traumatized. I mean, can you imagine being 8 and 10 years old and finding out your mom is going to prison for stealing money from other children? Lily started having panic attacks at school, and Jake became this angry little boy who would lash out at everyone. It was heartbreaking to watch. But even from jail, Rebecca wasn't done trying to control the situation. She'd call the kids during her allowed phone times and fill their heads with poison about how David and I had destroyed their family. She told them that if I hadn't been so jealous and vindictive, none of this would have happened. An 8-year-old shouldn't have to hear that kind of manipulation. But there she was, still trying to turn them against us. David was drowning. Between the legal fees for the custody battle, therapy costs for the kids, and just the emotional toll of everything, he was barely holding it together. And honestly, I had to make a really hard decision about whether I wanted to stay and help raise 2 traumatized children, or walk away from this incredibly complicated situation. I'm not going to lie. There were nights when I seriously considered just packing up and leaving. I didn't sign up for any of this. I fell in love with a man who seemed to have his co-parenting situation figured out, not this mess of criminal charges and damaged children who blamed me for their mother's crimes. The kids needed so much therapy. Family therapy, individual therapy, trauma counseling. It was overwhelming and expensive. David was working overtime just to cover all the costs, and I could see how much guilt he was carrying about not seeing through Rebecca's manipulation sooner. Some days Lily would hug me and thank me for protecting Daddy from the bad lady. Other days she'd scream that it was my fault her mommy was gone. The emotional whiplash was exhausting for all of us. I had to decide if I was strong enough to help this family heal, or if staying would just make everything worse. Update 4. When Rebecca's trial finally happened, it was like watching a master manipulator's final performance. She got 30 months in prison and had to pay full restitution to the charity. But even in court, she was still playing the victim. Her lawyer tried to paint her as this struggling single mother who made poor financial decisions out of desperation. It was disgusting, honestly. The worst part, the charity had to shut down completely. All those families who depended on the programs for their kids' school supplies and tutoring gone, because one selfish woman decided she deserved designer handbags more than children deserved educational support. I still feel guilty about that sometimes, even though I know exposing the truth was the right thing to do. David did get permanent custody, which was a relief, but Rebecca still gets supervised visits once she's released. The thought of her having any access to those kids after what she put them through makes my stomach turn. But the court said she has parental rights. Sometimes the legal system just doesn't make sense to me. The community reaction was mixed, to put it nicely. You'd think people would be grateful that I exposed someone stealing from children's charity right wrong. Some people actually blamed me for destroying a family and ruining the charity that helped so many kids. I had parents at my school giving me dirty looks, whispering about how I was the woman who went after a devoted single mother. It got so bad that I had to transfer to a different school. My principal was supportive, but dealing with the gossip and judgment from other parents was affecting my ability to do my job. Starting over professionally was scary, but honestly, my new school has been amazing and understanding about the whole situation. David and I started couples therapy to work through everything that had happened. He had to confront how easily he'd been manipulated and learn to trust his own judgment again. I had to work through my anger about how he'd treated me when Rebecca was poisoning him against me. It wasn't easy. There were sessions where we both cried, sessions where we fought, sessions where I wondered if we'd ever get past all the damage that had been done. But we were both committed to rebuilding something real and honest together. Update 5. I wish I could say that once Rebecca went to prison, everything got better. But honestly, healing from that level of manipulation and trauma takes time, like a lot of time. The kids slowly started to come around. Lily began trusting me again when she realized I wasn't going anywhere even when things got really hard. She'd started calling me Emma Mom sometimes, which made me cry happy tears. Jake took longer. He's always been more guarded. But eventually he started asking me to help with his homework again and telling me about his day at school. But then, after only 20 months, Rebecca got released early for good behavior. And guess what? She immediately started trying to worm her way back into everyone's lives. She claimed prison had reformed her, and that she deserved another chance to be a good mother. I mean, the audacity of this woman never ceased to amaze me. She couldn't directly contact David or the kids because of the restraining orders, but she found ways to make her presence known. She'd show up at the kids' school events, always staying just outside the legal distance, but making sure we saw her. She'd send messages through mutual acquaintances about how she'd learned from her mistakes and just wanted her family back. The hardest part was watching the kids get confused all over again. They'd made so much progress, and then suddenly their mom was back looking sad and apologetic, claiming she'd changed. Kids want to believe their parents love them, you know. It's natural for them to hope that maybe this time would be different. David and I decided to channel our energy into something positive. We started a new charity with strict financial oversight and transparency measures. We wanted to restore some good to the community after what Rebecca had destroyed. It's been slow going. People are understandably wary after what happened with the last charity. But we're building trust back gradually. As for our relationship, we finally decided to go ahead with the wedding. It took us 18 months of therapy and rebuilding trust, but we got there. The ceremony was small, just close family and friends, but it felt like this huge victory over everything Rebecca had tried to destroy. Of course, she tried to interfere even then, but we were ready for her games by that point. So here's where we are now, almost 3 years after I first discovered what Rebecca was really doing. I'm not going to lie and say everything is perfect, because that's not how real life works. But we're in such a better place than I ever thought possible. First off, David and I are married. It took us way longer than originally planned, but honestly, going through all that trauma together made our relationship stronger in ways I never expected. We learned how to communicate when things get hard, how to trust each other, even when outside forces are trying to tear us apart, and most importantly, how to recognize manipulation tactics, so we never fall for them again. The kids are doing amazingly well. Lily is 13 now and calls me her stepmom without any hesitation. She actually told her friends at school that I saved her family from her biological mom's lies, which made me cry for like 20 minutes. Jake is 11 and has become this incredibly empathetic kid. I think going through what he did made him more aware of when people are being manipulative or dishonest. I had to switch schools because of all the community drama. But honestly, best thing that ever happened to my career. My new school is so supportive, and I've been able to advance to a lead teacher position. Some of my colleagues know about what happened, and they've actually praised me for having the courage to expose financial abuse. It's nice to work somewhere that values integrity over keeping up appearances. David has grown so much through therapy. He's learned to trust his own instincts again, and not second-guess himself constantly. He still carries some guilt about how he treated me when Rebecca was manipulating him, but we've worked through most of that. He's become this amazing advocate for other divorced parents who might be dealing with manipulation from their exes. As for Rebecca, she's still on probation and working some retail job to pay back the restitution. She gets supervised visits with the kids twice a month, but they've learned to set boundaries with her. Last month, when she tried to guilt-trip Lily about missing out on her childhood, Lily actually told her, "Mom, we learned about manipulation tactics in therapy, and that's what you're doing right now." I was so proud of that kid I could have burst. Rebecca still tries little schemes here and there. She recently tried to convince Jake that I was stealing money that should go to their college funds, but the kids just roll their eyes now and tell David about it. They're not naive little children who can be easily manipulated anymore. Our new charity has actually been pretty successful. We've helped over 200 kids with school supplies and tutoring in the past year, and every penny is accounted for with full transparency. It feels good to restore some of the damage that Rebecca's greed caused in our community. The biggest revelation came last month though, and this is the part that still gives me chills. The investigation into Rebecca expanded, and it turns out she was part of this informal network of divorced women who were coaching each other on manipulation tactics through social media groups. Like there were dozens of women sharing strategies on how to turn their kids against new partners, how to make their exes doubt their new relationships, even tips on financial manipulation. When other divorced dads in our area heard about this network, 3 of them came forward saying their ex-wives had used similar tactics. It made me realize that what I went through wasn't just about one toxic woman. It was about a whole system of manipulation that was hurting families everywhere. So am I glad I exposed Rebecca? Absolutely. Was it worth all the pain and drama? Hell yes. Would I do it again in a heartbeat?